Hey Cats team. All right, so here's the last bit of that second widget demo. We're going to talk about adding JavaScript today. So that is going to let you do all sorts of neat visualization things with your widget. But the key is you're going to have to add it in a way so that you know to trigger the JavaScript once Cats is done rendering all of the HTML structure that JavaScript is going to depend upon. So if you haven't watched the previous video about the business card, you might want to just skim through it really fast so that you have the context. But I'll show you a little bit here. Here's the content HTML right here. We have this business card class called BizCard. We can pass it some things like a name and a phone. And then over here we have this widget. We created a tree sheet for the widget, and we can load it up. And now we see that. So now we're going to add a JavaScript file into the mix. So I've created, you'll see this widget.js file. It's completely empty. And I'm just going to put an alert hello in it so that we can see that it will load. And in the same way that I added CSS to my tree sheet, I can also add JavaScript links. And again, we could also have just added this JavaScript file to the content HTML page, but the tree sheet's a nice way to encapsulate all of this into one. So having added a link to this JavaScript file, let's reload the page. And we see that the alert box pops up. So we see that it's loading this JavaScript file. And now we want to do something with the resulting page. So let's take a look at this widget definition. So let me tab this in. Here's the container for the widget, and then here's the widget itself. And this guy is going to load inside of this BizCard class over here in the content HTML. So one thing we might do, for example, is just alert out this line 1 item right here, the add your name item. But if we print out the contents of this P element, then it shouldn't be add your name that we see. It should actually be Ted Benson over here that we see, because that's what's ultimately going to go in there. So it would be tempting to just say .line1 .html, let's alert that and reload the page. And we see undefined. The reason we see undefined is because when the JavaScript loads, Cats hasn't finished processing the page yet, and so the jQuery selector isn't hitting anything that makes sense. So instead we're going to have to wait until Cats is done, and here's how you do it. So as long as you have this file being loaded from the tree sheet, or loaded if you do it manually after cats.js, then you have access to this cats.loaded promise object. So you can say cats.loaded.then and then pass it a function. And the contents of this function are going to execute after the Cats library has loaded. And so now you can address things inside of Cats that maybe you wouldn't have been able to address before the Cats library was loaded. Then you can say cats.on, so this is how you register an event. And Cats received graphed is the name of the event. And this is going to take a function. Okay, so what we basically said is once Cats is loaded, ask Cats to notify us of any events called Cats received graphed events. So graphed, let's go back and look at the tree sheet, is this Cats rule right here, which is going to cause the design swap to take place. Now, this isn't a DOM event. This is an event in the space of the Cats shadow DOM, the parallel DOM that Cats creates. So this event is going to have a target. But that target is not a jQuery node or a DOM node. That target is a Cats node. The way to get the jQuery node from a Cats node, if it's an HTML node, is catsnode.value. So once we have this jQuery node, we've gotten the particular jQuery node representing the DOM node that received the graphed. So let's look over to this tree sheet right here. We see .bizcard graphed widget. So the DOM node, the cats node throwing the event, should be the cats node that represents this DOM node, .bizcard. So let's just do this as a gut check. Let's say alert jQnode.is.bizcard. So this will alert true if the jQuery node is this bizcard node and false otherwise. So let's reload that, and it says true. Okay, great. So now we know that we've got a handle on this element right here. And importantly, we know that we've got a handle on that element after cats is done doing the swap. So now we can go in and say, for example, jQnode.find.line1 .html alert and we get Ted Benson. So at this point, and the important thing here is this find is a find anchored in this content HTML over here, but addressing the structure of this widget. And remember that we are writing the tree sheet from the perspective of knowing nothing about the broader content page, but we only know where our anchor is because that's where we put the graph. And then we know what the contents of that anchor is ultimately going to be because via the graph we're controlling those contents. Okay, so alerting something out isn't very interesting. How might you do something more interesting with this? Well, one thing you could do is use different things you map in to parameterize some interesting visualization or JavaScript or AJAX calls, for example. So let's say we have a span class equals stock, or let's say, oh, I don't know, param1. And Flickr image query. How about that? A Flickr image query, and we want to display some thumbnails from Flickr. And I might say I want the Flickr image query to be of cute kittens. Span. Okay. So we might map this into the widget by creating a image query slot right there, and then we'd create a rule to say that in the widget, what did we call that? We called that image slot is Flickr image query. I misspelled Flickr. Okay. Let me get rid of that alert. All right, so we're not seeing anything. We're gonna have to debug live while we're doing this. Let's see, image dash slot, that looks fine. Widget image dash slot is dot Flickr image query. Did I spell everything correctly? Let's make sure we save everything and reload. Okay, so it looks like our cache is not reloading. This is, in some ways it's convenient this happened while I was recording the video. So if you notice right here, I just changed the widget HTML. I changed the phone S label right here so that we should see it reflected, but we're not. So I'm gonna pop open the debugging console, and that, because of my settings, should suppress caching. So let's reload it and try again. There we go, okay. So always remember, first thing to check, at least in my opinion, when you have a bug is your cache doing something funny. Okay, so we see cute kittens is mapped over here from the content HTML. Here's the thing though, we don't want to show the word cute kittens. We want to use that to parameterize the query that ultimately we might do via AJAX. So we can simply say via CSS, or I'm just going to inline it right here for simplicity. Style. We can apply a rule so that it's hidden. So now when I reload this, I won't see cute kittens, but the data is still there, importantly. And so if, for example, this is image slot is the class name. If we were to go into the JavaScript file and find the image slot node and then spit that out into an alert box, we still see cute kittens. So this now gives you a way to pass essentially hidden parameters into a widget. So where does this become really interesting, and what might you do with it? If you look on treesheets.org/demos and then click on widgets, you're going to see all these widgets right here that we've created, like for example, a choropleth, where the tree sheet defines a calling convention where you say, table class equals states, and that's combined with this USA choropleth widget, that's going to parameterize this widget up here that's ultimately created. Now, if you look at the tree sheet, what you're going to find is it maps all of these state names and values, which is essentially a table. If you're in a WYSIWYG environment, this is going to look like a table. And it maps them into a hidden div inside the widget implementation. And then the JavaScript associated with that widget waits until the graph happens. It loads the data from that hidden div, and then it uses it to create one of these maps. So this is a way you can invoke all of these JavaScript widgets with a table. So if you want to do all of these widgets, here's a confession. All of these widgets were written using an older version of Cats that's now completely incompatible with the new version. So none of these actually work with the new version of Cats. But it still might be worthwhile looking at the old Cat syntax and maybe even updating it to the new one as an exercise. Another thing you could do is look at the D3 webpage, and they've got all sorts of great visualizations here. But the problem is when you click on any of them, for reuse, you get a whole bunch of JavaScript right here. So one thing you could do is wrap all of this JavaScript inside a widget and then use HTML as a calling convention into this widget with this trick. Or you could do something far more simple and do a Twitter status lookup or a dynamic Twitter button. The key in all of it being, though, that you do two things. One is you use this pattern up here to wait till Cats is loaded and then wait until a graphed event occurs. And then you grab the node associated with that event, and then you can find things inside that node using jQuery or whatever DOM manipulation you want to then do something about it. And then, again, you can either explicitly grab things that are visible, or a trick is to make things invisible, and so you can pass parameters in to an invisible area of the widget implementation and then use that in your JavaScript to parameterize some functionality. So hope that helps. If you run into any snags, give me an email, and I will see you guys tomorrow.